What I have here today is the cut down version of the RX 560, or in some region it's called the RX 560D, or basically just a rebrand of the original RX 460. But the question now is, how does this perform in 2020? Let's check it out. Hello and welcome back again to Junkyard Summit, and today we're taking a look at the RX 560 14 CU edition. So what I got here today is the HIS Eye Cooler Green Edition, and before we go and check some game benchmarks, just a quick backtrack on this card's launch. The original RX 560 was first launched back in May 2017 and should be the direct successor to the RX 460 with more stream processors and compute units. But oddly enough, a few months later, AMD released a new version of RX 560, which is the model that I got here. And surprisingly, this is a cut-down version with, again, less stream processors and compute units than the original RX 560. AMD's response through Tom's Hardware was so that they can offer board partners more power options and at the same time different pricing options. But in my opinion, this is not a good move, especially to those users with limited PC building knowledge, as performance from reviews and benchmarks might be different from what they currently own. So going back to our RX 560, the model that I got here features 896 stream processor as well as 14 compute units. DirectX 12 and Vulkan API are also supported in this GPU, which is a nice thing to have, especially on entry-level card like this. Another good thing about this GPU is that this is only a 46-watt card, meaning you can run this GPU solely on its motherboard, and at the same time you won't be needing an external PCIe power connector to run this thing. Recommended PSU wattage is around 400 watts according to AMD and HIS, but according to my personal experience and testing, this card can easily run even on a 300 watt PSU, which is a good thing, especially if you're just using an OEM machine. As for pricing, I got this card for around 2,500 Philippine peso a few months back, and the expected market price should be around in this level, but due to the COVID pandemic, prices might be a little bit higher these days. For today's test setup, I'll be pairing this card with my Ryzen 5 2600 overclocked at 4 GHz, while I'll be pairing this with a 16 gigs of Corsair Vengeance RGB RAM clocked at 3200 MHz. As for the card itself, I overclocked it to 1350 MHz up from 1149 MHz for the core clock, and at the same time, memory clock was also overclocked to 1750 MHz. That is around 250 MHz more than the stock. So all results here will be based on these overclock settings. And with that, let us go to the benchmarks. The results are out, and based from the charts that we have just seen, the RX 560 is still capable even on newer AAA titles as long as you're willing to play on a low to medium graphical setting. Mainstream esports titles should not be an issue, especially to those newer esports shooters such as Valorant, Apex, and Fortnite, as they can easily handle over 30 FPS even on high settings. Newer AAA titles such as Control and Red Dead Redemption 2 can still run faster as compared to current gen console with a little trade-off on a slightly lower visual fidelity. But there's one thing that I don't like about this card, and that is the limited 2GB VRAM capacity. This is evident as we can see in some games where it is suffering from its 1% and 0.1% lows. And if ever you're planning to get the fully unlocked RX 560, expect around 10 to 15% more performance, and at the same time expect smoother frames if ever you're going for the 4GB version of this card. As for my personal take, I still think that this is a great card, offering decent frames on mainstream titles and can even run newer AAA titles at a slightly lower graphical settings. Though sadly, availability of this card is kinda scarce at the moment, mainly due to the COVID pandemic. But then again, I wouldn't recommend getting a brand new RX 560 as its price at the moment is really close to a GTX 1050 Ti or even an RX 570. And those two cards can offer much better frames as compared to this card. But if ever you're looking for a budget card in the used market, I'd personally go for an RX 560, especially if your budget is just around 2,500 and below. And I think that is a wrap for today's video. So what are your thoughts on this cut down version of RX 560? Comment it down below. And again, if you liked my video, go hit the thumbs up and please do subscribe to my channel for more GPU benchmarks like this. Once again, this is Brain of Junkyard Summit. Thank you, stay safe, and see you in the next one.